Alright, so in the last video I showed you a demo experiment using this level you see in the Unity editor here. Uh, in this video I'm going to walk you through how to create this environment and get it ready to drag and drop tasks in there. And you can create any kind of environment you want. You can do whatever you would like in this. I'll do another video showing you, if you have an existing environment, how to make it compatible with landmarks. So if you're not building from scratch but you have something already, you can still easily move that in and make it work with landmarks if you want to use the drag and drop tasks to build new experiments in that environment. So here we have the environment, but we want to start from scratch. So what we're going to do is go to File, New Scene. Alright, so when you open a new scene in Unity, you have two objects that come in there. It's the main camera and directional light. Landmarks has that all covered, so you can go ahead and just delete it. So now we have a completely empty scene here. So then in the project window of landmarks, you're going to want to go into the landmarks folder, into prefabs, and grab this, our ultimate prefab here, which is the landmarks prefab. So go ahead and drag and drop that into the environment. What you'll see is it's essentially a structure for the framework that is your experiment. And you can see there are two major components in it. There is the LM experiment and the LM environment. Today we're going to focus on the LM environment because we need an environment for people to navigate in before they can navigate. So today we're going to just cover, the basic structure of this and how to create one from scratch. So here we go. Alright, so you'll notice that we have that directional light that we deleted out. That's because we already have one here in the LM environment. And then there are these kind of four categories right now. Filler props, which is pretty much going to be everything in your environment, grass, sidewalk, streets, flooring, walls, anything like that is going to be filler props. Really anything that isn't one of your target objects that you want your participants to navigate to. If you want, you can provide target locations to spawn those objects into if you want it to be done randomly. And then also navigation starting locations. So on a navigation trial, you can give a number of preset locations where the player will be placed at the start of navigation. So let's go ahead and get started with some filler props here, which is essentially just building the environment. So you can create these objects anywhere or import them from anywhere. Just make sure that they go into filler props to keep things organized. So let's go ahead and right click on filler props and say create a 3D object, and let's create a cube here. Note that this is all just basic Unity stuff. This is not even actually landmark specific. Where we put it in this scene is landmark specific, but right now we're just creating a cube using the Unity editor. And let's make that actually into some floor here. And so to do that, let's make it narrow and let's make it 50 meters by 50 meters. So units in Unity are arbitrary, but the general accepted standard is to consider each unit in Unity to be 1 meter in the real world. That's what I will use for landmarks as well. And the Unity cube, so that cube object we generated, is the standard for that. It is a 1 by 1 by 1 in Unity units, which for us is going to be meters. So by making that scaled at 50 by 0.1 by 50, we're saying that it is now a 50 meter by 0.1 meter by 50 meter platform here. Great. So we have that, and let's say we want to add something more than just a gray floor here. Well, let's do that later actually. Let's focus on the basics for now. Alright, so we're going to go ahead now and create some walls. And walls are going to be essentially the same idea here. We're going to add in a 3D object. It's going to start off as a cube, but now let's say it's going to be 50 meters long, or wide, I guess, and let's make it 5 meters tall, and let's have it be the same thickness as the terrain here, 0.1 meter. Okay, because the center is right there, let's move it to half the height. Great. So now we have this wall here, and in order to properly position that, what we're going to do, so if you go into a game object in Unity and have it selected, if you press the V key on your keyboard, you'll notice that it snaps to these vertices. And what we can do then is make it snap its geometry to any other vertex. So then we click on this vertex here, and we can move it right there. Now we've got a wall that is perfectly lined up here. So now let's go ahead and let's do some renaming here. We'll just call this the floor. Just call this wall 1. Now let's copy the wall, rename it wall 2, and now we can use our same vertex snapping trick here. So with it selected, press V on the keyboard, click, there you have it. Alright, so now we want to create 2 more of these. So we could either duplicate that. I'm going to create another one just so that we don't have to rotate it at all. Let's create another cube. This time, let's make it 0.1 on the X instead of the Z. We were 5 meters high, and we need it to be 50. And it's actually going to be 50.2 because we want to cover this. So, move it up to 2.5. And then what we want to do is vertex snap there. Make sure we have this outer one. Actually, I think we wanted the inner one. And sure enough, we have some flush walls there. Okay, so let's call that wall 3. Let's duplicate it. Rename it wall 4. Rename the duplicate wall 4. Move it generally over here. And then use some vertex snapping to get it flush up against there. There you go. We already have an arena here now. So now let's go and add some colors to it, because this is going to be disorienting for participants. So if you're feeling creative, you can create your own materials, but I also have already created a bunch of materials, including one specific for this. So anytime you want to create a material, you can just right click and go to create material. It's outside the scope of this, and just for the sake of time, what we're going to do is use these pre-made materials that I have here. There's also a folder called base shaders where I've provided just some really basic colors here that you can apply. So anything you want to be one of these colors, you can drag these objects on, and all of the things that that object or that material is on will be that color. Alright, so for one of the walls, let's do, so we're going to do CMYK. So let's do one wall is the cyan material. So we can either drag it onto the material, or we can drag it right onto the game object in the scene view here. Either way, the same thing is going to happen. We can also drag it onto this and replace the default material. And you can see there it goes, just like if we dragged directly on there. So wall 2, wall 3 we do as magenta. Next one we'll do as yellow. And that leaves the last wall, which will be black. If I can click properly here. Alright. I don't think that actually dragged on there. There we go. Alright. And then, now that we have our walls, why don't we give the floor something as well? And for that, let's actually use... Let's see here, we could do a wood floor. So we have one floor here. You can see you can kind of just choose. You know what? I actually really like the wood, so let's do a wooden floor here. All right, so that is our basic arena. Now let's put some stuff into the middle of the environment here, so that things aren't just visible from everywhere. So in filler props, let's actually create something empty, and this is just for organization. Let's call pillars, and create another empty one if we want, and call that walls. We can actually go and drag these onto there, and that just allows us, if we ever wanted to move the walls around, we can move them all together like that. It's just good for grouping, good for organizing, so you can collapse things down. Big fan of organization. So alright, so let's go into pillars here. Let's create another cube. It's a popular thing here. Now let's make that 7 meters tall, and let's make it 3 by 3. So we'll do 3.5 because we want it to be there. Alright, so now we've got this pillar that can serve as this occluding object, and let's throw material onto that as well. Let's find a good one here. How about blue drywall? There we go. So you'll notice things are going to look a little different than the last video's example scene, but those are just shaders. You can drag anything you want there. You can create your own. I just have a feeling for blue pillars on hardwood floor today, so that's what we're going to do. Alright, so now we're going to go and just duplicate this a few times. Okay, and we can just place those wherever we want. So you can see this is all done in the Unity editor. Don't need to do any coding. I knew there was one more in there. Alright, so we've got those laid out now. Alright, so I think that's probably pretty good for now, at least, for the basic environment. So there you go, everything's in filler props. We're really just creating the environment in there. Now we want to add in some functionality here, because eventually we want people to be navigating to different objects here. And so anything that goes into this target objects folder is going to get read by LM experiment, and the various drag and drop tasks that you might use are going to auto detect what those target objects are. So if you have, you know, a map learning task and a navigation task and a JRD task, each of those tasks will all use the same target objects and handle them properly in that way, such that if you do a navigation task, any subsequent JRD task is going to test you on those navigation locations. So we want to add in some target objects here. So I actually have some pre-built ones here in the landmarks prefabs. You can go into targets, and right now there's just geometric ones. I haven't had time to go into Blender and build some stores, which is primarily what I use in my tasks. But you can also go and get free assets. There are packs that you can pay for or get for free to use different objects like cell phone or laptop or, you know, basketball. But for now, we're just going to use some geometric objects. And I've got these 4 prefabs, which you'll recognize from the last video. We're just going to go ahead and drag and drop those prefabs into the target object in landmarks. And so now we have them there. so they are really far away right now. So we're going to move them to be right in the environment there. Alright. Let's just drag them about. We can move each one individually if we like. You can place them wherever you want. You can rotate them around. Won't really matter for the sphere. Cylinder here. Hide it from those two though. Okay, so we've got these target objects, and really, like, it's the same thing. The only thing I've done other than create some basic geometric shapes using Unity's editor is I added a second collider. So I'll just go ahead and show you how to make one of these, essentially the same as what I have here. So just like we were doing before, you go to right click on target objects and we'll create a new object in there. You can see that I've already used up the kind of straightforward ones, but let's say we want another colored cube in there. So we can go and add that cube. There it is. Now let's make it a little larger. Maybe it's a rectangle. Alright, so we have our cube. If we go back into landmarks, materials, let's go and just grab a base shader here. Let's have it just be gray. Alright, so now we've got this gray cube. You want to make sure it has a name because landmarks will also read out their name. So if you call it cube, it's going to say navigate to cube, and your participants are going to be really confused. So here we're going to call it gray rectangular prism. Alright. And so as I mentioned, the one thing that I really changed other than just creating a simple object here is it will be tagged as a target layer, just like the other ones here. You'll want to make sure that it's tagged. And that's so that landmarks knows to identify it as a target. And then you're also going to want to create a duplicate of its collider. And this is just a component that's attached automatically when you create these 3D objects. So click on copy component, click again and click paste component as new. You'll see it duplicates it here. And so then what we actually want to do, this one is kind of the physical bounds. This one is going to be for it to trigger in our various tasks. So if a player walks into it when they're navigating towards that object, we want it to register. So we're going to check the is trigger box here. And then we also don't want them to have to walk all the way into it because that can be a little disorienting. So let's make this collider that surrounds it as a trigger. This won't expand its physical boundaries, but let's have it be essentially just a little larger. That way, now, if the player comes into contact with this prism, it'll register a hit before they actually slam into the object here. Okay. So, the next thing that you would want to do here is if you want to have these target locations be randomly set up. So if you just leave target locations empty here, you're actually good to go, and all of these targets will appear right where you have them. However, if you wanted to have them randomly populate, which I'll show you in a later video, probably not in this video here. So you could have all of your objects outside the environment, and you could go and you could add in essentially an empty object here. And if you want these to be your target locations, anything in here will populate those objects until it runs out of objects there. But I'll save that for another tutorial. For now, let's just keep it simple. Let's move our objects back to where they were here. Alright, and then by default it comes with a navigation starting location because that's pretty important. You can add in multiple navigation starting locations, and it will just cycle through them and randomly choose where to put your participant, and it'll cycle through each of the locations you make. So you could have 50 locations. If you only have 2 navigation blocks, it'll only use 2 of them, but it'll use 2 of them randomly. Alright, so that is everything that we need to do to create a landmarks compatible environment. And so I'm going to do another video where I show you how to essentially, if this had been built without landmarks, how to place it into landmarks, which will be a little redundant for those of you who built this along with me. But in the subsequent video, I'm going to show you how to take what we've created here and then add some basic tasks. And as you might know, the library of tasks will always be growing. Whenever I build a new task, I will add it to that library, and you'll be able to drag and drop it in there. So I'll show you just 3 example tasks from that demo I showed in the previous video. So yeah, that should do it for now, and I will see you either in the next video for how to move an environment into landmarks, or the video after that where we actually drop some experiment tasks into this environment we just created. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.